Where's du har min frown, and welcome to another video. This is actually a continuation of one of my previous videos called The Lord of the Rings and Old English, in which I explained that Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings mainly as a set of legends and myths for his own country, for England, because England doesn't really have enough of their own native stories, native legends and myths, does it? Beowulf, as I explained many times before, after all, this Anglo-Saxon was brought to Britain by the Germanic tribes that were invading Britain at the time and chasing away the original Celtic population. King Arthur is not English, it's really British, it's more like Welsh/Norman French, isn't he? And the same thing could be said about Robin Hood. He comes mainly from French ballads, doesn't he? So, among other things, Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings to provide his country with their own stories that could really be called her own. And because he was such a tremendous genius man, a philologist in the first place, a linguist who loved languages above all things, and he learned languages and taught languages and studied languages and their historical forms, and invented his own artificial languages, he took inspiration in the languages of old people, of old nations of Europe. His ancestors, our ancestors, in their stories and in their poems. And one of his favorite languages and favorite peoples, as he said, well, he had many of them, but is definitely my favorite language, was Old English, or the conglomerate of Old English dialects as spoken by the Anglo-Saxon tribes at around circa the 5th to the 12th centuries AD. And there was one poem that he took a direct inspiration from. It's one of my favorite poems, and it's called The Wanderer. Now it fell. And it is an Anglo-Saxon poem that was, of course, written down by monks in scriptoria, because Anglo-Saxons, you know, the original pagan Anglo-Saxon people, well, they did not have letters, right, to be written down on parchment. They only have runes, which were highly practical. And, you know, to be stamped in metal or engraved in stone or wood. But they, of course, had their own poems and their own songs, which they traded down orally. And then they were written down by the Christianized monks, because Christianity only came to Britain in the 6th, 7th centuries. And scriptoria were established in monasteries, and the old poems were able to be written down, but they were, of course, highly Christianized already. And one of them is The Wanderer, a poem about a man who was exiled from his town, his village, and it was, at the time, when you think about it, almost a death sentence to be exiled from a town, to wander through the wilderness of medieval Europe. Because what was the only thing that would ultimately happen? You would die. Something would eat you, something would kill you, you would die of starvation, or you would freeze to death. And the Wanderer, because the poem is very much Christianized, he in the end turned to really the only thing that was left to him, to God, when he didn't have his lord anymore, and the mead hall and the roof of the mead hall anymore, with the companionship of his friends and a cup of mead in his hand. The hall of the Lord was the only thing left. And I wanted to read a passage from The Wanderer because and just a passage because it's a long poem. And then I would like to compare it to a passage from The Lord of the Rings. Please do excuse my Old English pronunciation. Might have gotten a little bit rusty, but we don't really know for sure how it was pronounced. Yes, it was spoken more than 1,000 years ago. And then I'm of course going to read it in a modern English translation by Richard Hamer. Where tuo mer, where tuo maho, where tuo mathe muifa, where tuom symbla yesetu, where sindon selem dreamas, ela beorchtbune, ela birnwiha, ela theodnes thrim, hu seo frey wat, je nap under nidhelm, swa heon were, And then in modern English it goes, "Where is the horse now? Where the hero gone? Where is the bounteous lord? And where the benches for feasting? Where are all the joys of hall? Alas for the bright cup, the armoured warrior, the glory of the prince. The time is gone, passed into night, as if it had not been." And this is, of course, a direct inspiration that found its way into The Lord of the Rings. Now I'm going to read a passage from The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Is the chapter The King of the Golden Hall, which, of course, is the Hall of Theoden. And Theoden, by the way, was an Old English word for a king or a lord or lord of people. So if you think about it, Theoden is nomen omen. And that poem goes, "Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string and the fire red glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west behind the hills into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning?" So, as you can see, and that only proves my point from the latest video, I shall provide a link at the end of this video to that original video about The Lord of the Rings in Old English, how much the Rohirrim are basically the old Anglo-Saxons. It's almost one-to-one translation, and the language of the Rohirrim is really Anglo-Saxon Old English. The greetings that I say at the beginning of each and every of my videos is West to Hal. Was of course used in The Lord of the Rings. But really, it's an Old English phrase that could be translated be hail. Hail. Hello. Greetings. So my friends, let me know in the comments down below if you are as fascinated by these things as I am. By the fact that you can feel true history of ancient Europe in the lines of The Lord of the Rings, the history of my ancestors and the history of many of your ancestors. And if you are a little bit concerned about the Amazons, the Lord of the Rings of Prime, and the direction they're taking, very much away from the original idea of Tolkien and from our ancestors, from our legacy, from our cultural identity, as they say in America today. And tell me all about it. I'm very much interested in that. But that will be all from me. And thank you very much for watching. And Namari.